So hey, in just a minute, I'm going to something I want to talk to you about. I'm going to preach in just a minute, but the ushers are going to come, and we're going to give our morning tithes and offerings to God. And while they do, we want to give you some updates about what's happening in our lives and also in the lives of our church. So I'm going to ask Jim Ockenfels if you'd come join me, please. As we're preparing to make this transition, one of the things we've done with our kids is we've just said we want to give them as much information as we have, because it will be helpful for them, right? The more they know, the more questions we can answer for our kids, the better it will be. And so we've talked a lot with our kids. They know, we've just tried to be very upfront and very clear about what's going on. And so we want to do that with you as well. We want to just tell you what's going to be happening next, because there have been lots and lots of questions. And so this is Jim Ockenfels. And Jim has been on our advisory team for a good amount of time. I don't know sign language. Jim has the microphone. Right, okay, good. There you go. So, we wanted to just kind of tell you what's going on. Jim has been, like I said, on the advisory team for a good amount of time, and he has agreed, after we asked him, to serve as a point person during this transition. If you don't know, our church is a part of a larger network of churches. We are a part of the Free Methodist Connection of Churches. We have a superintendent who is managing this transition process. And she is in the process, and most of you have met her. She's been here a couple times, Alma Thompson, and her husband Brent is a co-superintendent. And she's actually going to be here in February as well to talk. But there is a good plan that's being worked, and Jim has agreed to be the point person in this transition, the connection between our church and her. And so during this transition, if you have any questions, we have a good team of people that's in place. And Jim is going to be the point person and all that. So if you have questions and you don't know to whom you ought to go, Jim would be the point person, and he can point you in the right direction. And he can, everything from bathrooms to coffee, right? And but what I would like to do just real quick is we have a group of people that have been meeting. We've met several times now. We are communicating regularly on WhatsApp. It's an app that we have on our phones in which we were talking about the transition. So if you've been a part of that group, would you just stand with me this morning? Just go ahead and stand. Now I just want you to kind of look around and, so there we go. These are the people, they kind of like are in the loop on what's happening. All of them are they oversee various ministries of sorts in our church. And so thank you guys. You guys can go ahead and sit down. Stacy. Yeah, that's right. There's some over. And I just want to say thank you guys, all of you, just for being a part of this. Stacy and Jill and Jay and Cindy and Rob and Jennifer and Ken and Kathy and Fitz and
glad you can make it this morning, Fitz.
Yeah. So just Josh Tater, I don't know what he's great. Yeah. So we got a great group, and I just want to say a big thanks to all of you for being part of that. So let me just kind of give you some updates. Let me just read to you really quickly from Superintendent Alma. She is in conversation with potential replacement pastors. And one of the things that she said, Jim, is that she is not a slot filler. So in other words, she's not one of those people who says, I got an empty church, I got a free pastor, boom. She said, I'm not going to do that. I know that Church 180 is a different kind of thing, right? And I like that she said that, right? And so she said, I'm looking for the right person. And I'd rather go a little slow than to go too fast and put the wrong person in there. So I'm tremendously grateful, because I love this church. I want it to be really well 10 years from now. And so she is as well with that. So they're working on it now. The plan is that Church 180 will lead itself for 4 to 8 weeks. And basically what that means is that the people that you've seen are going to be making sure that the infrastructure works. There will be coffee on Saturdays or on Sundays, right? Maybe Saturday. Right? There will be toilet paper. There will be kids care. So all of the things that make the church work on the weekend, they're all, because of the people you saw standing, they're going to be making sure that the infrastructure works. If someone's sick, these are the people that will be making sure that all the needs are met, right? So the church is going to be just fine. On the weekends, we have speakers lined up to the end of February. So there's going to be a speaker in here, a preacher in here every week. All right, there's a variety of people coming. There's some really cool people coming. I'm excited about that. Yep. And Jim is going to talk in a minute. He's not just here to look pretty, although he could do that, right? So that's what's happening. And then, now this is the plan as it currently stands. Again, the plan could change, but After the 4 to 8 week mark, they're looking to bring in an interim pastor for 3 to 6 months. All right, and again, these are just flexible timelines. This is the plan. After that, then they're looking to bring in a team of pastors. So basically, they would have a teaching pastor and a / administrative pastor. So they're looking to bring in 2. All right, and that's the plan as it stands now. Again, that could change. You know, maybe next week they find the perfect person. They are in conversation with several different people. But maybe next week they find that person and say, hey, we're going to blow up the plan as it stands. But that is as it stands. That's how it goes. So there is a plan underway. Jim?
There's a song called Make a New Plan, Stan.
Nope. Come on, Jim. So that's kind of the plan in place. So let's just talk a little bit about finances. Jim, you want to kind of tell us where we are financially?
Yeah, through the end of November. So these are rough numbers, but our total financial picture through the end of November, we've got 28,000 approximately, a little over 28,000 in the bank. And that's because of all of you. Thank you very much for your part of giving that helps make this church run. So we're in good shape financially. If you all stop giving, obviously, then we got an issue. But at this moment, we're in really good shape financially. All the debts are paid, and we've got 28K in the bank at this moment.
Yeah. So that, I mean, everything's, we're good to go there. So it's, you know, some people say, what's going to happen for churches to, you know, I mean, you're not going to close, right? It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So we've got preachers lined up. We've got solid leaders in place. There are finances in the bank. We're in conversation with a leader for our kids because we want to make sure that our kids are cared for as well. Okay. Some people have asked, what are Sherry and the girls going to do? So here's the plan for them. On next weekend will be my last weekend here. The following weekend, I'm going to take my family to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, so they can kind of get a lay of the land because that's where we're going to end up. We're going to look at houses. They're going to see the basic of schools, all that kind of stuff. And then the weekend after that, we're going to spend with family in Spartanburg. And then the following weekend, I'll be at Fort Jackson beginning training. And so Sherry and the girls, the cool thing about the position I'm going to be in is that I'll actually be able to see my family from time to time on the weekends. Not every weekend, but some weekends. So when that's a possibility, I would like to see them very, very much. So they're going to come and be with me there. And then some weekends they're going to be with family. And then some weekends they're going to be here. Because we've talked about, like, what do we do as we've talked with you, we've talked with some of you. What do we do as a family? Where do my wife and girls go? Where do they call home? And this is our home. This is our church. You are our people. We're family. We love one another. And so it wouldn't make sense for my family to be at another church because that's not what church is, right? Church is this group of people loving and caring for one another. So as often as possible, they're going to be here. When they're not here, they're going to be with me, if possible. And if not, then they'll be with family.
And then they come back here to recover from being with him.
That's not nice, Jim. What? Still roasting. Right. Yeah, we're done Friday. What in the world? So, okay. So that's kind of some of the plan that's unfolding right now. Jim has a couple things that you want to share with us. Guys, kind of been. You want to come over here?
Yeah, I'm going to step on something.
Yeah, do that. Do that.
Certain people behind the sound, up at the soundboard, are going to go, don't step on that stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, I do have, Holy Spirit's been putting a heavy hand on my heart and on my soul over the past few weeks. And I've talked to a number of you about what's it going to look like, what's going to be, what's going to happen. I had kind of a brunch with a fellow that attends here irregularly, and he had all kinds of questions, and he was taking some shots at Paul. He wasn't pleased with Paul's leaving. Well, I got to be real honest. I'm not real thrilled about it either. And I'm sure that sentiment is in your hearts as well, because doggone it, I love this guy. I told him, he has helped me grow in my spiritual journey in the few years that I've been here. And I appreciate that very much, that God has used him to build me up, grow me up, become a little more mature, which Terry would say, "Nah." But I do have a few words, I think, from the Holy Spirit that I wanted to pass along. And, we're in a period of transition. Transition is a real nice word for change. And that's causing a lot of us some nervousness and concern. Many of us are not real big fans of change. We don't like seeing things change. There are a lot of unanswered questions at this point in time. What's the church going to look like after next weekend? Paul and Sherry are going to be gone. Paul's no longer the go-to guy. Who's going to lead us? What's the service? What will the services look like? So let me cover just a simple, basic fact. Courtesy of God and my friend Fitz. He penned the words to a song. I need you. You need me. We need each other. As you look around in here, what is Church 180? It's all of us. We need each other. There's an opportunity before all of us that we have not seen before. An opportunity to get in the game. To stand up, walk down from the bleachers and onto the playing field. We have an opportunity to stretch our faith. We're in the Christmas season where God stretched humanity's faith. He asked us to believe in the Son. For most of you in this room, that's why you're here, because you believe in the Christmas story and in the person of Jesus Christ. Now God is asking Church 180 to believe and trust in Him as He guides Paul and Sherry into a new facet of His ministry. And there is no doubt in my mind or in my heart that He is in this. He's guiding Paul and Sherry. Paul is uniquely gifted to reach imbecilic young men and women, hard-hearted, cynical, and I'm talking about myself because that's the way I was when I was in the military at 18, 19 years old. He's uniquely prepared Paul and Sherry for that ministry. So if God's guiding Paul and Sherry, is He abandoning us? Because where God guides, He also provides. And, what's that look like? That's what the person asked me at brunch. Well, what does provision look like? And I told him a story. I told him a story about an individual who was living in a community, had a nice little stream going by his house. And a few miles up the road was a dam. And the dam was overflowing, fractures in the containment of the dam. Emergency warnings went out, the dam's about to burst. And it did. And there were vehicles coming to help people evacuate, jumping in. And they showed up at this guy's house and said, "Get in." And the guy said, No, don't worry about me. God will provide. Well, the water started coming. A boat came by. The guy was up on the second floor at this point. Boat showed up, said, "Get in, let's get you out of here." He said, No, go take care of everybody else. God will provide for me. Now he's up on the roof. A helicopter comes by, drops down a ladder, said, "Get in, let's go, you're going to drown." And he said, No, go get others that are needing it. God will provide. What happened? The guy drowned. And he showed up in heaven, and he said, "God, what happened? You didn't provide." God said, "Look, dude, I sent you a warning. I sent you vehicles. I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. What else did you want me to do?" Why did the guy drown? Because he didn't take advantage of God's provisions. And that's the story for Church 180. God is going to provide for us. He's going to provide. He's got us an awesome worship team here. But we need more. We need people who can sing, people who can play instruments, people who can run soundboards, lights, etc. We need people who can love on kids, who have a heart to love on kids and open up their lives to them and open up the kids' hearts to God. We have the opportunity for people who can serve coffee with a smile with an open heart, who can greet as people come through the door, ushers, counters. I mean, we've got lots of opportunities in front of us. We need people that can fix a toilet. It happens. We need those kind of folks. You know, a water heater. We've got a water heater going on. Do we have anybody that can fix a water heater? But more than that, we need people who can love on each other. That's the key, is love. Yeah. 2 greatest commandments are what?
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and the second is like unto it.
Yeah.
Love your neighbor.
The second one's just like the first. And all of Scripture hang on those 2 commandments. Love others like you love yourselves. So, I've got a son-in-law, actually. Interesting, he lives at my house. We live in the basement, he lives upstairs. He's an IT professional. He used to consult at Duke Energy. In fact, he built all the IT security for Duke so that we don't have a power grid get shut down by terrorists. That's one of the things that he did. Because of that, he had to drive into Charlotte every day from Rock Hill during the week. And every day, he said, he would get slowed down because somebody had an accident. So he came up with a really good philosophy. He said, now it's fairly simple. When you get on the interstate, merge into a lane, don't occupy the lane that somebody else is in. Don't go faster than the car in front of you. Don't jam on your brakes so that the car behind you runs into you. He said, if you'll just follow those simple rules, we'll all get to work on time. Well, I think that analogy of that traffic situation holds for us. Find your lane, get in it, stay in it. There's a scripture, Matthew 18, that talks about conflict resolution. And I want to be very gentle but very bold with what I'm about to say. If you're offended by someone, don't go around their back. Don't gossip to other people about it. Go to that person directly and talk to them. If they're crossing into your lane, go discuss it with them. Let them know. If you're crossing into their lane and they come talk to you, receive it openly and gently. It's going to be vitally important if we're going to survive as a church that we all work together, that we all love on one another, and that we all stay in our lanes, find our lanes, stay in our lanes, get involved, and go. It's our chance to shine. God's giving us an amazing opportunity to be an amazing church. What church out there do you know that pastored itself while we were working on trying to find someone else to lead us? We have the opportunity to be that church. We have an opportunity to shine really brightly in God's kingdom, because he says, look at the team that got put together and how they loved on each other and loved on others coming through the door. And a pastor came in and, oh my gosh, a lot of my work's already done for me. Cool, I like this job. So we've got that opportunity to be that church. My challenge is, will you join in? Get out of the stands, get down on the playing field, and become part of the body of Church 180, the team. You saw a bunch of people stand up. I'd love to see this whole room stand up. Okay?
Thank you, Jim. Words well spoken.
You got 10 minutes, Paul.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does that come from my preaching time? Okay, so let me tell you this real quick. After church, there is an opportunity here. We've got some cake and some coffee and some nice drinks, and I just encourage you to be a part of that if you have a few minutes extra to hang out. And eat. There is going to be some snacks in the back, and there's a really awesome picture, a collection of pictures that was made for Sherry and I. And there's a place where you can write just a note on it and sign your name. That'd be cool if you just take a minute and do that. I'm going to take that and hang it up. I said I'm going to hang it up in my office, and Sherry said she's going to hang it up somewhere in our house, and so we're having this little conflict now. We'll figure that out on our own. But it's a really cool picture, and I'd love if you just put your name on it. That'd be awesome. So after church, if you would care to hang out, we've got a little bit of snackage for you. So, well, crap. What time is it? It's 10:50. So here's the scoop. My good friend, Mr. Tater Langley, last week sent me a note that said, dude, I have never heard you preach as good a message as you preached last week. And I was like, Tater doesn't pass out. You guys know who Tater is, right? He's the big guy with the beard and the tats, and he's kind of quiet.
Big fan of the guy in the black shirt.
The guy in the black shirt. So he sent me this note and said that was the best message ever. And I was pretty moved because I thought, like, the last message I preached, what was that? Oh, I know what it was. Is where I talked about draw close to God. Like, if there's anything I hope that you'll take away from our time together, is this. Paul was always talking about, like, draw close to God, get close to God, get close to God. It's critical. So I was thinking about that. I was like, man, that was pretty awesome that he said that. I was actually pretty moved. And then I started reflecting on when was the last time we were together? Oh, wait a minute. He sent that to me on Monday, and the day before Monday was Sunday. Last Sunday, we didn't have church. So I went from like, Tater's so, God bless Tater, to God smite Tater hit the thigh, right? One of those things. But, so I just been thinking about, like, the last things that I get to say to you, like the last words, those are important, right? And so the 2 weeks ago, I just said, draw close to God. That's so critical. It will change so many dynamics in your life. Do whatever you've got to do to draw close to God. And the promise is in James chapter 4, verse 8, if you draw close to God, He'll draw close to you. But here's the scoop. Drawing close to God, it can be scary. And here's why. Because as you get close to God, He starts to say things to you. And sometimes God says things to you that'll raise your eyebrows. That'll scare you a little bit. Sometimes God wants us to do things and will tell us to do things that are difficult to do. It might be, I want you to approach that person who's offended you a long time ago and offer forgiveness. Or I want you to stop sitting and wishing and get up out of your seat and start doing the thing that you've been thinking about. Whatever the case may be, getting close to God often comes with a bit of fear. Because He calls us and tells us to do things, to act, to engage. And it's interesting because as you read through the Bible, you'll see over and over and over this idea of God saying, don't be afraid. Don't have fear. Move forward with courage. Don't be afraid. Don't have fear. Have courage. Right? He says this over and over and over and over. And the closer to God that you get, I promise you, the more you're going to need to hear these 2 words. 3 words. Don't be afraid. It's actually 4 words because one of them is, it's a contraction, right? Don't be afraid. I didn't think that through. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Just say it with me one time, will you? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. So, the Psalm, 23rd Psalm, I love this Psalm, and I actually like to read it from, most of us probably heard it and memorized it from the King James. I like to read it from the New Living Translation. Let me just read it to you from the New Living Translation. It says, the Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to His name. And then there's this verse. Psalm 23, verse 4 says this. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, say this, I will not be afraid. Why? For you are close beside me. Now listen, it is possible to live a life that's relatively safe and relatively undisturbed and relatively without cause for fear. You sit on your couch and you don't do much. I promise you, you get close to God and He's going to require things of you that are going to scare you. Yet David said, even when I walk through, the King James says, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. The New Living Translation says, when I walk through the darkest valley, I'm not going to be afraid because I know you're with me. So if I can say anything to you, it's this. Please draw close to God. And when you get close to God, there are going to be moments where He asks you to do things that scare you. And in those moments, I pray that you remember this. Don't be afraid. Even in the darkest valley, I will not be afraid because you're close to me. So, what I realize about fear, and you know this too, is that fear keeps us from relationships, right? I mean, listen, think back before you were married, right? You're a guy, and you see a pretty girl, you're like, oh man, she's a pretty girl. And I wouldn't even mind like maybe hanging out with her. But for a lot of us, we didn't because we were afraid. I mean, girls, you may have gone through that too. I don't know. I'm not a girl. I know I'm a guy, and sometimes fear can get in the way. But I mean, it's not just relationships. It could be jobs. It could be a dream. Some of you have a book inside of you that needs to be written. Some of you have some words inside of you that need to be spoken. Some of you have a business inside of you that ought to be begun. Some of you have there's a child that needs to be adopted, that you ought to do that. But the thing that keeps you from it is fear. Fear keeps us from all these good and admirable and God-initiated ideas and dreams. So there's a guy named Stephen Pressfield. And he's written a number of books. Really great author. You ought to engage with him. It would be good. But he wrote a book called The War of Art. And essentially his idea is that every artist, every creator, whether you're a writer or a musician or you're a creator, you create things. He said every artist has this idea that they want to create. You know, they're sitting over here and there's this thing that I'd like to create, but between them, where they are, and the place and the thing that they want to do, there's this space. And he says, in that space is this thing called resistance. And resistance is all the reasons why you can't do the thing that you have in your mind. Right? I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I've never done it before. All of these things, and he calls it resistance. And so he says this. He said, are you paralyzed with fear? He said, that's actually a good sign. He says, fear is good. Like self-doubt, fear is an indicator. It tells us what we have to do. He says, remember, this is our rule. This is what he says, and it's on the screen here. He says, the more scared we are of a work or calling, the more sure we can be that we have to do it. Resistance is experienced as fear. The degree of fear equates to the strength of resistance. Therefore, the more fear we feel about a specific enterprise, the more certain we can be that that enterprise is important to us and to the growth of our soul. So, if you're paralyzed with fear, it's a good sign. It shows you what you have to do. And here's the thing. I'm not one tiny bit afraid of getting up. When I think about leading an orchestra, at the New York Philharmonic, I'm not one tiny bit afraid of it because that's not something I ever aspired to do, not one tiny bit. Right? So it's not even, there's no way, I've not thought about it, I don't want to do it, I know, right? But I will tell you this, just thinking about everything that lies ahead in this next movement in our life, there's certainly some questions, there's certainly some fear, but because I know that's the thing that God has called us to do. And some of you are sitting in this room and you've got some fear when you think about things in the future. And you ought to use that fear as an indicator that perhaps it's the thing that God is calling you to do. Because there's no way, if you're still sucking in God's air, that God doesn't have something for you to do with that air. Right? There's no way that if you're still sitting here, that God doesn't have something for you to do. You're not done. There's still something for you to do. And my concern is that fear keeps so many people from actually moving into that thing that God wants us to do. And so I would just say to you, coming close to God, it will mean changing. You will change. You will be challenged. You will become someone that you are not currently. You will do things that you are not currently doing. And it may scare you. But God's call to you and to me, to all of us, gang, this is so real. God's call is this. Stop being a consumer and start being a creator. Right? Stop being told stories and start being the storyteller. Stop listening to the stories of everyone else and everyone else doing their thing, and you be the person that actually starts doing something that's worth telling a story about. Stop waiting for someone else to act and you act. Stop waiting for permission and you do the thing that God has been pressing into your heart. So one of my favorite stories, the story about a man named Peter. And you know this. It's in one of Jesus' biographies. Matthew. You've heard this story before. I'm probably, 100% of you probably have heard this story, some version of it. But I want to show you something you may not have seen yet. The story in Matthew chapter 14. This is what it starts. This is Jesus and his friends. They'd had a busy day. And Jesus says to his guys, he says, fellas, I'll tell you what. You guys, we've been busy. I want you guys to get in this boat. I want you to sail across this big lake. You go over there. I'll meet you over there. Immediately after he told him this, he had ministered all these people. Jesus sent the people home. He said, fellas, you go on. He said, I'm going to stay here and pray. Night comes. They're in the middle of the lake. It's a big lake. This is what Matthew says, Matthew chapter 14, verse 24. The disciples were in trouble. They did what Jesus said, and then they found themselves in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had arisen, and they were fighting big, big waves. Now keep in mind, these are fishermen, they're not rookies, they've been in these things before, but this is a big one. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came towards them. What was he doing? Walking on water. You ever seen him walk on water besides Chris Angel? People don't walk on water. They don't do it today. They didn't do it back then. It's weird. That's scary. You see somebody walking on water, you immediately think about all the medications that you've recently taken. Because people don't walk on water. Right? When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were afraid. They were terrified because this isn't normal. People don't walk on water. And they said, it's a ghost. That's what I would have said. Right? Like, something's wrong here. Like, there's a spirit happening. But Jesus said to them, right? He heard them screaming and yelling. This is what he said. He said, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And he said that because they were afraid. They were doing the thing that God told them to do, and in the middle of the thing that God told them to do, trouble started to take place, and they were afraid. They're afraid we're going to drown. Holy cow, there's a ghost. Like, this whole thing is just spinning out of control. Jesus shows up and says, don't be afraid. The next thing he said was this. Take courage. Matthew chapter 14, verse 27. Don't be afraid. Take courage. And he said, take courage, because it was a possibility. And so I would just say this to you. If you're in the middle of something that God has called you to do and you find yourself being afraid, please hear the words of Jesus that say, don't be afraid. Take courage. It's available to you. And here's why he said that. Matthew 14, verse 27. Don't be afraid. Take courage. I am here. I'm right here. In the middle of all this craziness, here I am. And that's a huge reason to take courage. So, these three guys, or these disciples are in the boat, they're all fishermen, this crazy storm, they think there's a ghost in the water, and Peter is the one guy that you hope never speaks up. Because he's the one guy that's always going to say something stupid, right? If you've read through the Gospels, you understand, like, if Peter says something, sit back and watch the show, because it's going to get crazy. And Peter did. He said something. Here's what he said. Lord, if it's really you, read it with me. Tell me to come to you. Walking on the water. So, remember we talked about a couple weeks ago? Come close to God. Come close to God. Do this with your life. Come close to God. So Peter's like, man, this is a crazy place. We're doing what you said. It's all kinds of chaos. I'm a little scared. If it's really you, I want to come close. So tell me to come to you. That's not, as I'm thinking about it, I'm watching Peter, my buddy, we're in this boat, and I'm like, that's not smart. That's not safe. It's not necessary. That's crazy. People don't walk on water, Peter. But he said it. And look what Jesus said. Yes. Come. So Peter went. Out of the boat, he walked. Now, if you've been around church any time at all, you know that you've heard the story, and you know that Peter started out strong. He's like, boom, I'm out, I'm walking on water. And then he realized what he was doing. All of a sudden it hit him, like, this is dangerous. I could actually die. Right now I could die. And he got a little concerned. He started to sink. He yells out to Jesus for help. Jesus reaches out to him and saves him. Let me just read to you what happened. Peter went over the side of the boat, walked on the water toward Jesus. He saw the strong wind. Save me, Lord! Jesus saves him, reached out to him and said, why'd you have so little faith? Why'd you doubt me? Right? Why'd you doubt me, Peter? When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. The disciples worshipped him, and they said, you really are the Son of God. You are who you say you are. You're the Son of God. And here's a fun fact. Jesus hadn't planned on stopping. When he said, fellas, I'm going to stay over here for the night. I'm going to pray. Y'all go over to the other side. I'll meet you over on the other side. He starts walking out on the water, doing Jesus' thing. He did not plan on stopping. Here's how I know. Because one of his other biographers, Mark, says this, Mark chapter 6, verse 48. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the water. Read this with me. He intended to go past them. Jesus wasn't going to stop. He's like, all right, you fellas are okay. You're fishermen. You've seen a storm or two. I'm just going to go ahead on over to the other side. I'll see you over there. You know why he ultimately got into the boat? Why did Jesus ultimately end up getting into the boat? Because one man was crazy enough to make a really crazy request. If it's you, Jesus, tell me to walk on the water. They all saw Jesus, but only one of them was bold enough to call out and to get out of the boat. Only one of them was bold enough to make the call. All of them were scared. All of them thought it was a ghost. But only one called out and got out the boat. Jesus changed his direction. He changed his plan because one man was bold enough to call out and get out of the boat. Now here's what I want, and I pray for every single one of you. As you do what God has called you to do in your life, you're going to encounter chaos, and you're going to encounter moments of fear. And I pray when that happens, you'll be the one who's bold enough to call out to Jesus and get out of the boat and go to him. Now listen to this. Peter called out. Because Peter called out, Jesus, if it's really you, tell me to come to you. Jesus says, come on, Peter. You come close to me, I'll come close to you. Right? James chapter 4, verse 8. You come close to God, He'll come close to you. So come on. Because Peter did that, 4 things happened. Let me show you. Number 1. All of them experienced relief. Everybody in the boat got some kind of relief from the chaos. This is what Matthew says in Matthew 14:32. When Jesus and Peter climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. We'll just say this to you. There are people in your sphere of influence whose lives will be blessed because you're brave enough to call out to God and get out of the boat. There are people who need you to do the thing that God has called you to do. There are men and women and children right now in your sphere of influence whose life will be blessed and they'll experience relief when you do the courageous thing. But I promise you this, gang, if you sit in the boat for the rest of your life, your chaos will continue and so will the chaos of the people around you. Because Peter called out to Jesus and he got out of the boat, everybody experienced some form of relief. Second thing that happened. All of them worshiped. Right? Jesus climbs back into the boat. This is what it said. Matthew 14:33. The disciples worshiped him. They're like, wow, this is it. This is whatever just happened here was extraordinary. It was crazy, windy. We thought we were going to die. Then we saw a ghost. Now you're in here. We give you praise. This is extraordinary. They had a moment of worship that they would not have had Peter not stepped out of the boat. And I just say again, there are people in your sphere of influence, their connection with God may depend on your act of courage. The intimacy of their worship may depend on your act of courage. So if you sit in fear, you could limit other people's connection with God. Third thing that happened. Everybody in the boat had a revelation. They had a moment of insight. As Jesus climbs in the boat with Peter, this is what they said. You really are the Son of God. We wouldn't have known that before. We just would have thought it was a ghost. But because that crazy guy Peter had enough courage to call out and to get out, now we understand something about God that we didn't before. But here's the kicker. The thing that Peter did impacted all of them. This act of courage that Peter did impacted all of them. Here's the kicker. While all of them had a moment of relief, all of them had a moment of worship, all of them had a revelation, only one of them had a get out of the boat story. Now, lots of people can tell about what they've seen, but only the people who get out of the boat can tell about what they've done. Right? I pray to God that you'll be men and women who get out of the boat. Don't tell somebody else's story. Don't tell your pastor's story about how he followed God. Don't tell your grandma's story about how she followed God. Don't tell your sister's story about how she followed God. Tell your own story. Right? Get out of the boat. God is calling you to do something. Don't let fear keep you in the boat. Get out of the boat. So someday you get to tell your own story of what God has done. I mean, here's the truth. This is what Peter learned and what we can learn from Peter. We don't know what Jesus can do until we ask him to help us do what we can't do. Some of you are sitting in the boat right now and you're thinking about the things that you want to do, and then you immediately think about all the reasons that you can't do it. Let me just tell you something. This is the moment to call out to Jesus and to begin to ask him for help, to begin to draw close to him. And it's amazing what happens when we begin to move close to God, the things that begin to open up, and the opportunities that present themselves, and the resources that begin to present themselves. The truth is, sometimes people won't understand you. And they may make fun of you. And they may walk away from you. But someday they'll tell your story. Someday they're going to enjoy relief and they're going to participate in worship, and perhaps they'll experience new insights because you asked God for something extraordinary and you stepped out of the boat. So here's my prayer for you, gang. That you will absolutely step out of the boat and live with courage. Don't let fear keep you from the thing that God has called you to do. So for all of us who sit in the boat and wonder, should I get out? Should I go for it? Should I reach out to Jesus? His response is the same that it was to Peter. Yes! Come close to God, and God will come close to you. You say, how do I know what that thing is? Well, what's the thing that causes you the most fear? That might be a hint to the thing that God is actually calling you to do. My God, I hope that if we see one another 10 years from now, you'll say, you know what, man, I stepped out of the boat. It has been crazy what God has done since then. Right? The rest of those dudes that sat in the boat, they didn't get to see Jesus do the extraordinary thing. I mean, they got to see it, but they didn't get to participate in it, right? God has something he wants to do in your life, but it's going to require an act of courage. It's going to require an act of boldness. It's going to scare you, but it's going to produce the best stories. It's going to produce the best fruit. It's going to produce the best results. Results you can never get if you don't get out of the boat. And so here's my prayer for you, my heartfelt, passionate plea to you. Get out of the boat. Do it.